Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I would like to call this meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Marla Billinghurst. I will be chairing the meeting this morning. On the panel with me this morning are Mr. Kent Seelan and Ms. Valerie Warren. Representing the assessment department is Mr. Matthew Harling, and our administrative personnel for this morning is Ms. Phoebe Graywood. To the Zoom participants of the hearing, please note you are placed in the waiting room until your property is called upon. When it is your turn, you will be admitted into the meeting. Kindly follow along on the City of Winnipeg's Board of Revision YouTube channel for the hearing process. Once a host admits you into the hearing, please close or mute your YouTube player. You will then be permitted to speak with respect to your property. Once your hearing has concluded, you can leave the meeting. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today, and the session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will become part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1, 3, 4, 8, and 9 on our docket today. Ms. Graywood, would you please affirm the assessor's and the applicant's testimony?
Mr. Harling, please state your full name.
Matthew Harling.
Do you affirm the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Navarro, state your full name.
Marcelo Navarro.
Do you affirm the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The first matter we will be hearing on this morning's docket is number 1 on Lorimer Boulevard, file number 242683. So, Mr. Harling, please proceed when you're ready.
I was gonna say, was there any, I believe there's some rebuttal information or something. Is that first we have to hear, I guess, or no? Do I just go through my information? I was just sure, like
Well, the rebuttal, so you have rebuttal information?
No. I was gonna say that I know there was some rebuttal. I think Mr. Navarro said he had some, I believe. And are we gonna be hearing that first, or no? We just can just go through my.
Well, the rebuttal would be.
Okay, I mean his, yes. I mean, I just okay. I just want to make sure, like, yeah, because I know sometimes I've had different situations. Okay, anyways, yeah.
Okay. So, Ms. Graywood.
So usually the rebuttal would be presented after the applicant.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure, yeah, and that's what I thought. I just want to make sure on the same page because I just had a weird situation once. But anyways, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, that's why I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, no. That's yeah.
Usually the rebuttal comes after.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was kind of thought. I was kind of like, yeah. So I just wanted to make sure, yeah, because there was a, yeah. Anyways, I'll continue. Sorry about that. So.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Okay, so thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so the file number is 24-2683. The roll number is 1000641740. The address is on Lorimer Boulevard, and the owner is numbered company 5444501 Manitoba Ltd. The 2025 roll year, based on a reference date of April 1st, 2023, is $5,481,000. If you look at the bottom of my brief under property description, we'll see the property type is Vindu, where it's a vacant industrial. It is zoned for M2 manufacturing general, and the land area is 538,725 square feet. If you turn to page 2 of my brief, at the top, you'll just see a Google aerial view of the subject. Where the little red dot is where the subject is located. And if you look further down on page 2, at the bottom, you'll see a more of a aerial view photo where you can see the parcel of the subject property again with the little red dot there, just to show where it's situated. So if we turn to page 3, we just get an actual idea of the actual parcel itself we're dealing with here. So you can see where it's located. So it's just located off of Sterling Line Parkway, and just north of it's Wilkes Avenue. West of it is Kenniston Boulevard, and the street it's on is called it would be Lorimer Boulevard. If we turn to page 4 of my brief, we'll just see another view of the subject, just a more of a zoomed in photo, just to get to show the subject property in its entirety. Again, you can see all the different streets fronting around it. This continues on page 5. Again, just another photo, just from a further angle, just again to show just the overall property where it's situated. Then page 6 is just another photo of the subject angle. I wasn't able to get it on one page, so it's just showing it from Sterling Line and then the other side on Wilkes. Again, just a big piece of land. And then lastly, on page 7, this is just a street view on Lorimer Boulevard, just to show that again that it's just a vacant piece of property. As you can see here, just the grass, and trees. If we turn to page 8 of my brief, we'll just see the valuation summary. So we're just assessing this property again on its land value at $5,481,000. And there have been no recent sales. The last sale occurred was in December 5th, 2007. If we turn to page 9 of my brief, we'll see the zoning information. Again, I indicated it's an M2, which is a manufacturing general, and just a brief description of what can be developed on this type of land. So you can see here, just a brief description is this district is intended to provide for light manufacturing, processing, service, storage, wholesale distribution operations with some limited outdoor operations and storage. So just a brief description of what can be developed on this piece of land. Okay, now if we turn to page 10 of my brief, we'll just see a table here with my land sale comparables as well as the subject. So in the very far left corner of the table above, we'll just see, again, the subject information here. So as I indicated, it's a Vindu or vacant industrial parcel of land. It's roughly 538,725 square feet or 12.367 acres. And as indicated, it's zoned M2 manufacturing general. Some of the influences we have on this property are it's a bus route, external corner, heavy traffic, and there is a rail line. If we look just at the bottom of my brief under the land valuation table, we can see here, again, the total area we're assessing, as well as the rate we are applying. The land rate is $10.17 a square foot, which gives us an overall value of $5,481,000. Now, if we look back at my table, we can see the comparable sales I've shown. So comparable number 1, this is just located in the, it doesn't have an address, but it's located in the North Inkster Industrial Zone area of the city. It's a Vindu or vacant industrial parcel. The land area is roughly 285,796 square feet, or roughly 6.561 acres. This one actually has a dual zoning. It's a commercial and M1 zoning light. Some of the influences on this parcel are heavy traffic, external corner, and no sewer, no water. And this property sold on June 20th, 2019 for $9.76 a square foot. And just to kind of go, maybe to make it easier, if you just turn to page 11, you can see just a photo of the actual comparable here. Or the sale, I should say. I apologize, the sale. So if you just want to, if you want to take a look, you can see the sale here, where it's located again, just off of Inkster Boulevard. So you can see the parcel in its shape entirety. Comparable number 2, this is located on 55 Fultz Boulevard. This is located in the West Fort Area Industrial area of the city. It's another vacant industrial parcel of land. It is 377,953 square feet, or roughly 8.677 acres. It is zoned for M2 manufacturing general. And then you can see some of the influences on that particular comparable. We have retention pond adjacent. There is something that says restrictions. I don't know why that's there. That shouldn't be there. So I have to adjust that. But the property sold on February 24th, 2017 for $15.87 a square foot. And if you turn to page 12 of my group, you'll be able to see a photo of that particular comparable. So you can just see a zoomed out view where it's located, just off of Fultz Boulevard, Henlow Bay. So it's in the Kenniston area of the city. If we turn to comparable number 3, this is located on 220 Newmarket Boulevard. This one is a property use code is classified as a vacant commercial. The land area is 421,879 square feet, or roughly 9.685 acres. It is zoned for M2 manufacturing general use, and we have no currently land influences on it. And this property sold on September 2nd, 2020 for $14.90 a square foot. And this comparable can be shown on page 13 of my brief. You can just see a photo of where it's located, just off Newmarket Boulevard, very close to Abidjana, and then Skerfield Boulevard. And lastly, comparable number 4. This is located at Oak Point. This is located in an Oak Point Highway portion of the area of the city. It's a VINDU, or vacant industrial parcel. The land area is 453,099 square feet, or roughly 10.402 acres. It is zoned for M1 manufacturing light use. And some of the influences are limited access and no sewer or water. And this particular piece of land sold on October 20th, 2022 for $12.62 a square foot. And if we turn to page 14 of my brief, you'll just see a photo of that property, again, located just off of Oak Point Highway. And you can kind of just see the shape of the parcel at the top, and then just on the bottom of page 14, it's just a more zoomed in image of the parcel. So those would be those are the comparable sales I have applied. So I believe they bracket the sale of the current assessed value and the land per square rate of the subject. Now, if we turn to page 15 of my brief, well, actually, I apologize. Pages 11 through 14 are already just some photos of the comparables, which I went through already. So, and if we go to page 15, it's just the information regarding the classification and liability allocation. Again, this is just assessed at its land value at $5,481,000. If we go to page 16, 17 of my brief, this is just some Municipal Assessment Act user information. And that concludes my presentation, and I am open for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Navarro, do you have any questions for the assessor?
I do just have a couple of quick ones. The value that was estimated for the property was based on the model. The model valued the property. You had no part in adjusting the value of that property.
Yes, correct. I had no, yeah, correct.
Okay. Now, regarding comparable 4, did you look into this sale any further than just calculating a rate per square foot on this property?
In terms of, like, what do you mean by looking into it further? What kind of information are you, like, in terms of like who it's sold to, or?
Yeah, who is sold to and what this property is going to become.
I know the sale itself, when it was in 2022, was between I know it was between a numbered company and a purchaser called Miracle Property Developers. So I know it was between those that I am aware of. Yes. So
yeah. Okay. Those are the only questions I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Seelan, do you have any questions for the assessor?
Yes, on page 5, you have some, we'll call them orange lineage and stuff here. Is that each of these different properties, the orange lineage?
yeah, basically the number 5, the orange outline, is essentially the same as on page 4. It's just a different view of it. Like, yeah, it's essentially the parcel outline in orange. Yeah, so all the different parcel outlines for different properties. Yeah, so.
Okay. Does this property have sewer and water?
It does have, I believe it is on fronting on Lorimer. There is sewer and water, yes, but there's some more questions I'm sure Mr. Navarro might have information about that. But yes, it does at this time, yes.
That's fair. And to the left of this property, we have a house that's, I'll call it kind of a pie-shaped lot, which west of the property, there's a house there, I assume?
Just north of it, you mean, or?
West of it.
Oh, west of it. Well, that's actually that park there. That's an industrial kind of there's a lot of flex warehouse properties. So there's a lot of like industrial or retail kind of use, and yeah. So it's an industrial. Yeah, it's an industrial park. Well, not really a park, but yeah, it's all of flex warehouses, whatever. For yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's all my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Ms. Warren, do you have any questions for the assessor?
No, mine were just answered. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have no questions either. So, Mr. Navarro, please proceed with your presentation when you're ready.
Okay, and we'll deal with the rebuttal after my presentation.
Yes.
Okay. So there are two documents that you want to have at hand for this presentation. And I'm sorry I didn't mix them together, but in terms of the sales that I used, they're pretty much the same sales for the entirety of the package today. So it is the picture package that you should have. So just tell me if you do find that.
Yes. Pictures. Yes.
Okay.
Has
Okay.
everyone found that?
Yes.
Okay, and along with this I also submitted the Altus Group industrial capitalization rate study. That one is also another one that you need to keep open because I'm going to refer to a couple of pages within that study as well. So we'll look at, we'll start with the report on Lorimer Boulevard. And then on page 2, you can see the assessment summary, the amount that we're seeking. Page 3, the intended use of the report, the intended user, scope of the work. I can flip to the pictures on page 6, some of the same pictures that the assessor used as well. There's a little property just west of our subject. I'm not sure if that's actually some type of former religious organizational building belonging to some denomination. I don't know who owns it at this point, but I believe it was classified as a church at one point. On page 8, you can see the property land improvements and description. So I'll just briefly read and summarize this section for you. So there is a rail line that actually cuts through on the west side of this property. So the rail line doesn't entirely inhibit any type of development on the industrial side. It would still allow for industrial development. But as you can see with some of the other properties that the assessor has used, those don't have the rail line, which inhibit other uses. So one primary use, which couldn't occur in this area now, is residential. And you can seek variances to adjust from the zoning if there are specific needs within the plan, the City of Winnipeg plan, to allow for more construction of residential housing. In this case, you would not be allowed to do that because of that railway line. On top of that, there would be some issues in terms of even some commercial uses. So the uses for this property would be primarily industrial. And if you look back at page 6 and you see the overhead picture, so the lands directly to the west of the property, not right up to Kenniston Boulevard, are essentially what are proposed to be one large industrial subdivision in the future. Now, nothing has started on this subdivision. In fact, the lands are still for sale. In fact, the subject is for sale, and it has been for the last 10 years, and that's actually summarized in the property description. So there is connections to land, sewer and water. However, they don't meet the standards of a subdivision, and there would be a requirement to have higher capacity services, which there aren't at this time. So there are several issues with this parcel of land, including the railway line, the lack of services in terms of capacity, and also the lack of development in this area. So this is where we have to make the distinction between what is a shovel-ready parcel, and that term I'm going to start flipping out. So you should probably get used to it. There is a difference between what is a shovel-ready development and what is not a shovel-ready development. And so none of these things have gone into this area. There's no roads into this area. There's no sewers. There's no electrical connections. None of those are in. So this is not a shovel-ready development. Now, if I flip over to the next page, on page 9, the highest and best use of this property is its current use as an industrial parcel. And we don't think that will vary in the future because the city has outlined that they want to keep as much employment lands available for employment uses. And employment uses is kind of a new terminology that's being used for what is effectively industrial properties. So if we turn to the analysis and land value on page 11, this is the list of sales that I used, going through sales or indices 1 through 11. You can follow along with pictures as well, but I can briefly give you an explanation because I've written a short summary of them on in the paper itself. So index 1 is in the neighborhood of Chevrolet Boulevard, 1420 Waverly Street. In terms of its comparison to the subject, this is a slightly better comparison because, first of all, it's built for a single site. It's not built to be part of a subdivision. And also in terms of its development at the time, all of those things necessary for construction of whatever came in here would have been in place. And the concern is not so much for single sites, it's for properties that are parts of larger subdivisions. So I would classify the first one at 1420 Waverly as a shovel-ready site. Number 2 is in the Stockyards area. This is 29 Spears. This would be index 2 in the pictures. And this is a good comparison for the subject. Located in the Stockyards area makes this area comparable, although the subject is a little unlikely to be developed at this time. And the reason for it is that there's already some construction there. So, indices 3 through 7 are suited for flex warehouse with close access to Lajimodier Boulevard and the perimeter highway. So through indices 3 to 7, you will also see that there is 330 Mazenod, which is quite a large site. So you can see there that it's 690,000 square feet, or 15.85 acres. So Mazenod, even though it's a large acreage, I would view it as inferior to the subject, simply because it's kind of, it's kind of hidden away in a little part of St. Boniface that, not too many people know it's there. It's out of the way. There's no real visibility to it. The subject does offer better visibility. But again, in terms of what you would be looking at in terms of comparability, neither one of them is shovel ready. So in that sense, it's somewhat similar to the subject. Indices 8 through 9, which are again in St. James and in St. James, these are in an area suited for transportation and logistics. Subject is not. So what I mean by that is that when you're looking at transportation and logistics, what you want is proper access to highway systems or arterials. So even though our subject is right next to Keniston Boulevard, access is not direct. So you have to basically come around and go onto Sterling Lion and then access the arterial. Whereas the King Edward's situation, you basically come out of the site and you're right on the arterial. Now the next one, which is index 10 and is in Symington Yards. This is not a built-up area. Access and egress into this area is not good. Overall, this location is slightly better and the location is slightly larger. So the only problem with index 10 is that there's really no development here at this time. So this is kind of more a speculative buy. I think they're probably looking at down the road versus the next 5 years or even the next 10 years. They're going to have to wait for development essentially to reach this area. And that is different than the subject. Index 11, which is the last one, that's 198 McPhillips. This is an older industrial area. In terms of size, it's not really comparable. It's more comparable to some of the other properties that we'll be looking at, but not a good comparison. So in terms of how we approach this, well, we looked at what it would cost essentially to develop this site and take into account that it's not shovel ready. So that factored into our decision on the valuation. And we used a rate per acre. However, I can give you the rate per square foot that it works out to. So just so, because you're looking at the index and you're probably seeing a price per square foot in there. Oh, you're seeing a price per acre. Okay, so we don't have to worry about that. So we're looking at about $322,580 per acre. And this is more in line with what happened last cycle, with an increase, obviously, but we didn't see much sense in terms of the increase on the assessment because it was just so substantial that we didn't know what was driving it. It's a model value, so we'll leave it at that. But our value is based more on the increase from the last cycle, taking into account sales that have occurred in the past and adjusting for those parameters that any prudent purchaser would account for. So we've adjusted it to $322,580, and that works out to $3,992,800 or $3,993,000 rounded. And I'm open for questions on the presentation, and then afterwards, I'd like to present my rebuttal.
Yes, okay. Mr. Harding, do you have any questions for Mr. Navarro on his presentation?
Just a couple quick ones here. So I know one thing you mentioned, Mr. Navarro, was that you talked about the capacity, service capacity would require larger capacity servicing. Is that if it were to be, because I know you'd also mentioned on page 8 of your brief said they can't, you say here like the answer, they were looking at rezoning for multi-residential development, and you say the answer was no or fully due to inadequate servicing. So would the servicing, is it just inadequate for if it were to be tried to be developed as for residential use, or like in its current use for industrial use?
No, if it was, for example, a large single or double site for multi-residential and the city allowed that, there would be no requirement to upgrade these services. The service upgrades would be required if this were to be maintained as an industrial subdivision, which is the plan, because the city has outright rejected it. We spoke to the owner and they've said that they've gone to the city several times and they've said that, we're not going to allow multi-residential development on the site. So this essentially will be maintained as a industrial development, an industrial subdivision. So, and you can see that the subdivision actually goes beyond the property lines of the subject and extends to the property next door to it. So that is a much larger property, and there will obviously be more costs involved in developing the entirety of the site. But where it starts is with the subject. That's where essentially the services have to start. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it gives me some more ideas. And I was just kind of curious too, is like, because I noticed like, you indicated that the parcel's been on the market for a number of years. So, like, is there any like listings out there of what they're asking for or anything like that? I was just trying to find some information. I couldn't really find anything. So I was just curious if there's anything like any info on that at all. Or...
Yeah, typically when these lands are advertised or marketed, they're marketed almost silently between companies and brokerages. They don't necessarily go out and advertise them because it's not the average person that can simply pick up a phone call or a phone and call and say, oh, I'd like to buy this property. Usually you're going to brokerages themselves and saying, look, this is what I need. Can you find this for me? And that's how they are marketed. But however, as I said, this property has been on the market for sale. In fact, there's a banner like right in the front of it indicating that it's been for lease the last 10 years as well. And that involves part of the issue with the property itself is that because there's been some barriers to the city not allowing some types of development. So essentially the property every year gets a tax bill for X amount of dollars, which there's no profit coming from this location because there's been some issues, as I noted in my presentation, with the development process in general. This is not a shovel-ready lot. There's a lot of things that have to be factored in before it gets to that. And so they were trying to get additional income out of this one. What typically would be done is that you see some storage facilities or transportation facilities south of that where they park trailers, right? So that's probably what they would do is they would seek an opportunity where, a company would need to park their trailers, car dealerships could park their cars, something like that, lease it out on a temporary basis, basically to mitigate the loss of taxes. And also draw some comparison to the former Capion Barracks, because that development in general has been delayed for very similar reasons. There is one stage off of Taylor that's being developed right now, but the rest of it, the bulk of it, is not being developed. And that is because there are some issues which are very similar to this subdivision. And those have to be addressed before any type of development can start. So this is where we think it differs from some of the analysis that you provide. And certain things have to be taken into account, I think, when you look at this property, and there have to be some adjustments made to it. That's why we've adjusted it the way it has been.
Okay, I think that's all my questions, and thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Seeland, do you have any questions?
Yes, you mentioned that there's issues with the land drainage. Can you elaborate on the issues with the land drainage, please?
Okay, so just to be clear, there is drainage and so there is sewer and water hookups, okay? However, those sewer and water hookups didn't contemplate a larger subdivision. And this is what point that I tried to make is that this is part of a larger industrial subdivision that's going to come into place that's going to need larger capacity. So that's what I mean by it, is that it's not in place at this time. Those development costs haven't been contemplated. And you'll see in some of the other properties that we look at, you'll see what a shovel-ready property is and why it achieves a much higher value. I hope that answered your question.
Sure. You mentioned, I believe, trains pass here. There's a train line here.
Yeah,
How often do
well,
they train?
believe it or not, I live in this area, so I'm often stopped by this train. Um, and it causes quite a ruckus because it's right next to a large subdivision of land of residential land, Lindenwoods. And when you're trying to go west on Sterling Lion and go to the outlet mall or IKEA or something like that, and you hit the train, you're there for 10, 15 minutes. So it's actually more often than you think.
Like, also in your brief, you mentioned there's a municipal caveat. What is the caveat?
The caveat basically dictates that those services have to be put in by the owner. So there's a huge cost to them because at this point there's no demand and they can't get the proper approvals that they need for the type of development that they wanted to build in this land. So it has to stay at an industrial development. I think when they initially bought this parcel of land, they were looking at multi-residential construction. They weren't looking at industrial construction. So they bought it for different purposes. But because of the issue of employment lands and further need to kind of keep that inventory in place for future industrial development, the city has told the client that no, we're not going to allow any type of multi-residential development, which changes the math completely. A multi-residential development in any sense is likely a little bit more lucrative, and the gains are better for that type of development than they are for the industrial sector. Hence the reason that multi-residential lands tend to sell for higher prices than industrial. So if you're looking at the portfolios, the different types of assets, whether it's commercial, retail, office, multi-residential or industrial. Industrial is always at the bottom. You're always going to get the lowest values there because it's a simple question of density. The higher density a development has, then the higher value that it's going to achieve.
To make this property shuttle ready, what specifically, in your opinion, would one need to do?
So I believe that's partly in the rebuttal as a counter to one of the sales that the assessor had put in there at 220 Market, because in my comparisons, I was quite clear about not including any sales for this property that were of shovel-ready lots or shovel-ready comparisons on a larger scale. So the problem with this comparison that was used in there, which is part of the rebuttal, is that there is a huge cost incurred in terms of developing or putting that infrastructure in there. So it works out to about 140,000 to about just over 200,000, 240,000 per acre. So it's quite a sizable sum. And that's something that the owner has to basically take or, dish out, whatever way you want to put it, incur.
Okay.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ware. And do you have any questions for the applicant?
Just one along the same line. So the on your page 12, your 1.1 million would be for the laneway and the land drainage. Is that the cost for just those two items?
Well, that is the municipal caveat. No, the cost of putting in the laneways, the streets, the services, the electrical hookups, the lights, the sewer, the water, and the drainage, because sewer and drainage are different lines. Those costs would far exceed 1.1 million. That's an old figure. It's not a current one. So I updated that in the rebuttal because I was able to include it in terms of the rebuttal for that one sale that I mentioned that the assessor had.
Okay. Okay, that's, Madam Chair, that's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My questions have been answered. So, Mr. Navarro, you have rebuttal evidence?
Yeah.
All right. 1 minute, please. Ms. Graywood, have you sent it to us?
I distributed this.
Um, Just trying to refresh this because I've not received it yet. Okay, I've received it. Has everyone else received it?
Yes,
the-
I have.
Ms. Warren? So you're on mute and I can't.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Yes, I have.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Harling?
Yes, I just received it.
Okay, perfect. Mr. Navarro, please proceed with your rebuttal when you're ready.
Okay, the assessor included a group of sales in files 2683. There's a couple of others that we noted that the same sales were used in a couple of other of the briefs. However, we are concentrating mainly on 2683. So the following evidence pertains to rolls 07092, 163000, 220 New Market Boulevard, and 55 Fultz Boulevard. Okay, so the first one is regarding, let's call it Oak Point instead of saying the roll number. 07092 163000 is located on Oak Point Highway, so let's just call it Oak Point Highway. The first picture that you see there is taken from the assessment website, so this is their information. The next picture is taken from a document that I pulled out of the document management system from the city of Winnipeg. So they have a lovely system where they basically keep all orders and business of the city of Winnipeg digitally in the internet. And you can access this as a citizen, and it's a valuable resource, which we often access. So the site is actually called Dimas. And we were able to find this particular property within Dimas. So Appendix B is taken out of the document that I've attached as an appendix. It's strictly the picture, but you can see that they are the same property. And this is part of the property that will be used as the development for the new transit garage. So this property was actually expropriated at a later date. So the property was sold in late 2022. And this is where the problems arise with this sale. So starting with the issue of the expropriation. So the city started its expropriation process a little bit later. So what I've included in here are the comments relating to mid to late 2022. So I'll start on page, on your page 3. So right at the very top, during a market investigation in mid-late 2022, the public service identified an existing city holding near Oak Point Highway. So what that means is that the city owned some lands at Oak Point Highway. And you can see the lands in the picture above on page 2 in Appendix B. The lands that are in orange are those lands that the city owned. So those are the lands that are being referenced as existing holdings on Oak Point Highway, which in addition to 2 privately held properties amounts to roughly 27 acres. And this is what planned development is for the garage. It's 27 acres. It's quite a large property. Both of the privately held properties were listed for sale in 2022, and the city has negotiated business terms for the sale of one of these properties at 100 Oak Point Highway. Public Service subsequently initiated negotiations for the second private property. So again, while this is all going on, the property is exchanging hands, as Mr. Harling said, everybody is aware that, okay, the city wants to do something with these lands. And they weren't able to come to an agreement with this property owner. So ultimately, they had to resort to an expropriation to take these lands. However, that's not the point that I'm trying to make. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the city was in dire need of these lands, and they had to go out there and purchase them. And they couldn't purchase them. So effectively, they had to take them by force, which is by expropriation. Now, part of the problems with that is that not only are you having to compensate people for injurious effect, but you're also having to pay probably an inflated value because those lands have to be acquired. Now, that's not what we're looking at here. The expropriation happened after this sale, but this owner obviously knew that there was something in the works and that there was an assembly occurring. And that is the most important point in this, is that anytime that you are assembling a group of properties together, and this was the last part of the assembly, you're going to pay a higher amount for it. That's just common sense. It's actually written in the appraisal literature, and you can find it on page 4 of my report. There it talks about the possibility of assemblage. So whenever you assemble any type of property, you have to be aware of what is driving the market. Is it the actual market value for these individual parcels, or is it a higher and better use that's not being contemplated? And this is what we're getting at, is that this property value is being driven by the assemblage of these properties. It's not being motivated by anything else. And that's where it differs from our subject. So our subject is not an assemblage of properties. And this one is clearly an indication of assemblage. And the city actually writes it right in their report. So if you look at page 3, and this is the last highlighted yellow paragraph where you can see next to it, it says see Appendix 1. So I'll start from the beginning. The Public Service has been unable to conclude negotiations with the owner of the proposed acquisition. The Public Service has explored both land exchange and purchase options without success. Expropriation is recommended as the most timely means to assemble the land and complete the project. Okay? So this is the very definition of what the issue of assemblage is. And if you're wondering where I got this from, this is from the appraisal of Canadian 3rd edition of appraisal of real property. So this is basically where, you know, most people look at in terms of the appraisal industry for guidance. So I'll leave it at that. We can talk about the issue afterwards. I'll get to comparable number 2 or comparable number 3, which was 220 Newmarket. Now, the issue with this property is that, for one thing, I know something about it because I've been involved with this company as a client for several years, right from its inception. And these are the former sugar beet lands. that were developed, and there is a secondary plan in place here. Most of the uses are outlined. And services for this location, and in fact, for the entire site were done. So this was a shovel-ready lot. So you can see that the roads are in, light posts are in, all of the services, the manholes, you can see the manholes if you look closely enough. Sewers were in, water lines were in, all the electrical connections into the subdivision were in. So this is what you call a shovel-ready site. And that is why it achieved a much higher value. So you can see in my paragraph below the picture there, the picture shows the construction well underway on comparable number 3. That picture was taken in May of 2021. The sale occurred, I believe, in late 2020. However, having been on that site many times during that time frame, I mean, these services were already in place. They were already in place in late 2019. So in contrast, the subject at Lorimer needs road access into this subdivision. It needs a higher capacity sewer and drainage that I spoke about, water lines, electrical servicing. Lorimer, the subject is not a shovel-ready site. So according to the Altus 2022 cost guide, included in the appendix, industrial site servicing in Winnipeg ranges between a low of 140,000 per acre and a high of 230,000 per acre. Based on this range, servicing costs at the subject would range between 1.7 million and 2.8 million. So that is the difference. And when you break apart a parcel, a bunch of sites within a subdivision that's shovel ready, you're going to demand larger amounts for the smaller and smaller portions. That's how economies of scales work. But speaking from the perspective of the subject, the subject doesn't have those services in place. So if you turn to page 30 and 31, you can see the excerpts from the Canadian cost guide that I took. So this is a publication that Altus Group does across the country, and it's used by experts across all industries relating to real property and real estate. Even banks use it. So we wanted to look at what the site servicing costs were for industrial subdivisions. So that is actually in there. At the very bottom, I've highlighted it in yellow. At the very top, you can see that I've highlighted Winnipeg. And you can see that industrial per acre site servicing is 140,000 to 230,000 per acre. So that is where I got my number from. And that certainly influenced the valuation that I put on the property and why it's so far off of some of the comparables that the subject or that the assessor has used. In particular, the property at 220 Newmarket. That property, again, as I said, and in this rebuttal is shovel ready. So all of those things were in there. That's why you're paying so much more for it.
Okay.
The last property that I dealt with is 55 Fultz Boulevard. So there's an interesting story to this property. This is a car dealership. At the very top on page 6, you can see 2 pictures there. One is an overhead picture from the sky, and the other one is kind of like the first one is what we call a bird's eye view. So what you see there is the bird's eye view of the car dealership, and this is Jim Patterson's Subaru. So next to it, you can see a lineup of cars, and there's an empty lot in between them. So they bought the entirety of that parcel there, including the empty lot that's in between the line of cars and then the car dealership on the left. Now there's a barrier there. So you can't access the Waverly Auto Mall. And that was the reason that they bought it is because they thought that they would gain access to the Waverly Auto Mall. And ultimately they didn't. But their their reasoning for purchasing this site was, first of all, location. It's visible from Keniston. It's visible from, you know, I'm going to do this, and I apologize for it, but I just can't pronounce the new name, the old Bishop Grandin. So it's visible from both sides. So it has that high visibility, but not only that, they were also looking at the connection to the Waverly Auto Mall, which would have given them direct access, and, you know, it would have been a really good location, and that's what's driving the value. But ultimately that fell through and they didn't gain access. So you can see from the overhead picture below that there is access through South Bridge, and that is basically the Waverly Auto Mall and South Bridge Road directly from Abinogi Mikina. That is the old Bishop Grandin. They don't have access to that, so you can't access the site through there. You actually have to go around through the industrial park north of it into Henlow Bay and then access Fultz Boulevard. So it's quite the little jog to get in there. And ideally, I think what they were looking at was, you know, the connection to South Ridge Road, which was the Waverly Auto Mall. But again, as an agreement that didn't work out. So they don't have access to it. And it turned out to be not the best site for them. They're working with it, but obviously the initial intention was to have that access to the Waverly Auto Mall, which is why the value was so inflated. It was supposed to be part of the auto mall. So
Okay.
that's the bulk of the argument for that one. So I'm ready for questions. That is basically the entirety.
Of your rebuttal? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Mr. Harling, do you have any questions for Mr. Navarro on his rebuttal evidence?
Just in the spirit of making things go forward, I think I'll be a good, thank you. So
Thank you very much. Mr. Seelan, do you have any questions for Mr. Navarro on his rebuttal evidence?
No, I don't, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Warren, same question.
None, Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, neither do I. So thank you very much. Is there a need for a brief summary from either party on this matter?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we can move on to the next matter on the docket, which is, sorry, bear with me for 1 second. That is the property located on my mistake. That is the property file number 243714. Mr. Harlan, please proceed when you are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As mentioned, the file number is 24-3714. The roll number is 0309300890. There's no address on file for this particular parcel, and then the owner is the Hopewell Bishop Grandin Developments Incorporated. The 2025 roll year based on a reference date of April 1st, 2023 is $4,690,000. If you look into the property description below my brief, you'll see the property type is Vindu or vacant industrial. It is zoned for M2 manufacturing general, as well as CMU commercial mixed use. The land area is 426,257 square feet. So if you look at page 2 of my brief, you can just see where the property is located here. It's actually located very close to some of the properties we were just speaking to, particularly the one Mr. Navarro indicated on 200 New Market. So I'll show you as we go along. But yeah, so this is just located in that just off of like Newmarket Boulevard, Skirfield Boulevard, close to just north of Chevrier Boulevard. So if you look at the bottom of page 2, where the little red dot is, you can just kind of see an aerial view photo where the subject is. Now, if we turn to page 3 of my brief, you'll see the actual subject property itself. So you can see here where it's outlined here. Again, just west of Newmarket Boulevard. And then you can just kind of see here how it's shaped. Again, just a squarish parcel of land. And if we turn to page 4 of my brief, you just see another photo from a different aerial view. And this way you can just kind of see, again, just the parcel itself and where it's located. Now, if we turn to page 5, my brief, we'll just see the total, the cost of, or the valuation summary. We're assessing again just the value on its land value at $4,690,000, and there have been no recent sales on the subject. And lastly, we turn to page 6 here. We'll see the zoning. It's a zone for M2 manufacturing general, and just a brief description of what can be built on that type of land, which I had mentioned previously in the other property. And so again, just M2 zoned land, what can be developed on there. Okay, so now if we look at my comparable sales here, so the table here, so we can look at the subject here. Again, it's located in the, I guess, close to the, just off of Kansas Boulevard area. The PUC is, or property use code is vacant industrial or Vindu. The land area again is 426,257 square feet. The land area is roughly 9.786 acres, and the zoning is M2 manufacturing general and with a CMU commercial mixed use. And if you look under below my brief, under the land valuation table here, you can see that again the area that's 426,257 square feet, and we're applying a land rate of $11 per square foot, which gives us the value of $4,690,000. Okay, so now if we go back up to the table, we can look at the first comparable. So this comparable is actually very close to the subject. It's in the same area. So this one is a VCOM or vacant commercial piece of land. It's 167,891 square feet, so it is smaller than the subject. I'm mindful of that. The land area is 3.854 acres, and then the zoning is CMU or commercial mixed use. And some of the land influences in this piece of land are external corner, retention pond, adjacent. And this property sold on July 7th, 2022 for $30.45 a square foot. And if we go to page 8 of my brief, we can just see where it's located. So this is actually, you can see you can actually see the subject property in this same photo. So this is just Friends New Market Boulevard. Now, I'm mindful of the fact that it's commercial, so commercial use. So commercial typically land sells for more typically than industrials. You know, Mr. Noor had alluded to previously in the previous property. So I'm very mindful of that. You know, it would sell for a much higher price per square foot, but you know, it's in the area, and I'm just trying to show that you know what land does kind of roughly go for in this area. And it is smaller too, so that would be another factor too. So I'm very mindful of that. So. Comparable number 2, this is located on 1420 Waverly Street. This is a Vindu or big industrial parcel of land. It's 207,777 square feet, or roughly 4.77 acres. This is zone M2 manufacturing general. Some of the influences are bus route, bus stop, and heavy traffic. And this is a slightly older sale sold in March 24th, 2016 for $11.79 a square foot. So again, very close to the subject, just being off of Waverly. If you look at the page 9 of my brief, you can see a photo of that particular comparable. So again, you know, being on Waverly obviously would be a bit more, you know, Waverly being a very main street, a lot of it, you know, busy, you know, a lot of traffic and visibility. So I'm mindful of the fact that we'd have that for the subject. As you can see, though, it's slightly irregularly shaped, whereas the subject would be more of a typical square shaped land. So you would have a bit more usable land. So this is another factor that you have to take into account. So, but again, that's comparable number 2. So compare number 3, I spoke to this one previously, and then Mr. Navarro had already mentioned it as well in his rebuttal, but 55 Fultz Boulevard, land area is 377,953 square feet, roughly 8.677 acres, zone for M2 manufacturing. And this one sold again on February 24th, 2017 for $15.87 a square foot. I don't know if there's any point of going through the picture because I believe the board's seen it previously as well in both cases. Comparable number 4, this one's actually located at 220 New Market Boulevard. So this one's actually just next door to the subject. The property use code is VCOM, vacant commercial. The land area is 421,879 square feet, roughly 9.685 acres. It is zoned for M2 manufacturing general use and sold on September 2nd, 2020 for $14.90 a square foot. If we just look at page 11 of my brief, you can actually see this is literally just the property just next door to the subject. So, you know, I'm mindful of the fact that it's, you know, got access off a New Market close to the subject. So that would be another, you could meet another argument. You could say that would make it a little superior in that sense, but overall they're very similar in size and obviously location. So, and lastly, compare number 5. This is the one that was on Oak Point, which obviously was spoken to previously, and as well as in Mr. Navarro's Evans rebuttal. So again, 453,099 square feet, roughly 10.4 acres, zone for M1 use. Some of the influences are limited access to water, sewer, and sold on October 20th, 2020 for $12.62 a square foot. So that one was already, I think I've seen multiple times in photos as well, but again, that's on page 12 if you'd like to see that. So that being said, those are the comparables. I believe that, you know, bracket the subject property and then the rate we've applied. If we turn to page 13, my brief, we'll just see the classification and liability information. Again, taxable piece of land assessed at 4.69 million under its land value. And pages 14 and 15 is just some municipal assessment actors information. So that being said, that concludes my presentation, and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Navarro, do you have any questions for Mr. Harling?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Seelan.
Based on your comparables, what would you say is the most comparable property to the subject?
Well, I mean, it's, you know, I don't like to typically say one, I don't like to pick a comparable that's best, but I mean, obviously, I guess comparable 4 is right beside us. That would be the closest, I guess you could say. That would be, so.
That's fair. Thank you. That's all my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Warren, do you have any questions?
None, thank you.
Thank you. Nor do I. Thank you very much. Mr. Navarro, please proceed with your presentation when you're ready.
Okay, so I will start with this property. And on page 2, you can see the assessment summary. I'll just actually make some side commentary because you noted in the previous example that I said that 220 Newmarket Boulevard was not a good comparison for the subject at Lorimer because one was shovel ready and one was not.
Mhm.
In this case, clearly 220 Newmarket Boulevard is right there. There's no getting around it. That's the perfect comparable. And really there is no case here. So while I'm not going to confirm it, I will just leave it at that and say that the assessor's comparable 4 is an excellent comparison for the subject in this case. Not in the other case, but in this case, it definitely is because of the similarity in terms of location, size, the fact the services were in place. There's no getting around this. So I will leave it at that.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Okay. Yeah. Mr. Harling.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan, do you have any questions?
No questions, Madam Chair.
Okay, Ms. Warren, do you have any questions?
None, thank you.
Thank you. Neither do I. Okay. Is there a need for summary from either party on this matter?
I'm good. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Mr. Navarro?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you. Sorry about that. All right. Okay, sorry, give me, sorry, 1 second to flip the page. The next matter on the docket this morning is number 4. So it's file number 243442. Mr. Harling, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As indicated, the file number is 24-3442. The roll number is 0309300275. And there's no address to the file, and the owner is Hopewell Bishop Grand Development Incorporated. The 2025 roll year, based on a reference date of April 1st, 2023, is $9,819,000. If we look under page below, we'll see the property type is Vindu or vacant industrial. It is zoned for M2 manufacturing general use, and the land area is 915,943 square feet. If we turn to page 2 of my brief, just kind of maybe speed things up here. This is actually very close to the previous property, so it's right in the same area. It's actually we're literally just east of 220 Newmarket, one of the comparable sales I indicated. So if we just go to page 3, you can see where it's located. So just get an idea if we're in the same area. So you'll see the outline of the parcel right here, so you can see where it's located, just to get the same idea. Page 4 and 5 are just some further photos of the subject. Again, just in that same area we had spoken to, so you can kind of just see how it's shaped. And then page 6, just some street view photos from Newmarket Boulevard, looking at the vacant piece of land. Turn to page 7, we'll just see the valuation summary. Says at $9,819,000, and there are no recent sales on the subject. And if we just turn to page 8, we'll just see the zoning, M2 manufacturing general, and just the brief description, which I indicated previously. All right, now if we turn to page 9 of my brief, we'll just see the land sale comparables, as well as the subject information. So as mentioned, the subject's land area is 915,943 square feet. It's roughly 21.027 acres, zoned for M2 manufacturing general. And if you look at the bottom of my brief there, or under the land valuation table, you can see the area again, and the rate per square foot we're applying is $10.72, which gives us the value of $9,819,000. In terms of these comparables, I'll be asked, these are the exact same comparable sales I used for the previous property. So I don't know if I don't need to go into, varying details. So I'll just kind of make it more brief. Now, mind you, this is, like I said, this is a very large site. They're trying to find comparisons of that size. There's just not a lot of sales of comparison of, properties of that size in the city itself. So I'm mindful of that. But the comparables range from 167,891 square feet to 453,099, roughly 3.854 acres to 10.402 acres. You can see some of the zonings of the M2, M1, and some of the land influences. Sales range from the dates from February 24th, 27, or March 24th, 2016 to October 22nd, or October 20th, 2022. And the price per square foot range from $11.79 to $30.45 a square foot. So if we go to pages, like I said, 10, 11, 12, and 13, these are just some photos of the comparables, which were the previous ones we've spoken to. So I'm mindful of the fact this is a much larger site. Just a second. Now, if we continue just on page 15, again, you'll just see the classification liability information and the assessed value of $9,890,000, and just some municipal assessment actors with information on pages 16 and 17. So that being said, that concludes my presentation, and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Navarro, do you have any questions for Mr. Harling?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan.
Just a quick question. When you get to these larger sites, is there, I'll say, more of or less, I guess I should say, less of sales, less sales to get purchase these sites? Like, is there more of a deterrent because they're so big and smaller sites will sell for more?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at a site of like a much larger site, you look at that like concept of economies of scale, right? Of course, like, typically a larger piece of land is going to sell for, obviously they'll sell for a lot because it's for how the size of it is. I mean, there's so many factors that go into it too, but I'm very mindful of the fact you're right. There's not a lot of sales of pieces of land this large, right? So, it would take, obviously, there's not your everyday developer is going to be able to use this piece of land because it's much larger. So, but that being said, it's still obviously in a good location. It has good, it still has a lot of use to it. So, but you're right, it would take, a particular type of developer or some purchaser to, need this much space for something. So I'm mindful of that, but yes, it's definitely, like I said, one of a very large site comparison. Yeah. So.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Ms. Warren, do you have any questions?
Just out of curiosity, that's a retention pond?
Yeah, just in the picture there, just to the east of it, just a retention pond, correct? Yeah.
Okay, does that have any influence on market value?
I mean, I guess it's hard to say. I mean, it's more of like an aesthetic thing, if anything, right? It's like, obviously, it's used for drainage too, right? Like in time for storms and such like that. So I think it's hard to say how much value it would influence. I can't say specifically how much it would. So, I mean, I guess it really depends on maybe whoever purchases it, maybe if it's something they would like or want. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I have no questions. So Mr. Navarro, please proceed with your presentation when you're ready.
Okay. So we are looking at one of the adjacent parcels at roll 03093002785. On page 2, you can see my summary. I'll ask you to flip to page 6 to see the property pictures. You can see the overhead picture at the very top with the yellow star. So next to it, you can see another parcel, which is a retention pond primarily, and it's used for land drainage. So on the next page, you can see the property land improvements description. So this parcel is roughly 21 acres and zoned M2. The primary roads for accessing this parcel is off of Skirfield and Chevrolet and Bishop Grandin. The city of Winnipeg approved the Bishop Grandin Crossing Master Plan in May 2014. This plan outlines land uses within the development as well as density. And this is MU employment, and as I mentioned before, there is this change in terminology. Typically industrial lands are being referred to as employment lands now. So M2 zoning on it, as I said. On page 8, you can see the zoning outline or the primary use outline. So at the very top, you'll see two sections that are next to each other on the right and left, which are kind of, I don't know, let's call it pinkish. Those are the industrial parcels. And the one on the left, which is above, which actually is part of the ones that we just looked at that sold at 220 Newmarket. Those parcels have been completely upgraded. Those services are in. The one on the right, which is our parcel, which is 21, isn't fully developed. And you can see that there's no roadways going into it. Now, this is intended to be a much larger subdivision, as the assessor alluded to. So what we envision here is anywhere from 15 to 20 lots, ranging around, I don't know, 3/4 of an acre. So that's what we envision in here. This is a subdivision. This is not one individual lot. So similar to the argument that we were using with Lorimer, it's not intended for a single site. It's part of a future subdivision. And those services aren't all in there. The drainage is in there because we know that the manholes and those things are in there. We walked those lands. Like I've actually walked right into this parcel and seen what's in there. Now you can see a slight green section to the right of our parcel. Now that is actually parkland. So within any major development, especially one that has secondary plan, there has to be a certain amount of land that is dedicated towards parkland. So this is what's called a parkland dedication. And that is basically what's there. So you see the green space that's in there, that is specifically for park use, and then the retention ponds that are used primarily for drainage purposes, but also for aesthetic reasons. Below that, you'll see kind of a beige area that goes right off to the right side and aligns with the bus transit corridor. So this is primarily an area of residential development. So multi-residential development. The services in this area are primarily already in, and that's actually where the development process started in this entire area. So as an entire development, the first buildings that started to be built were I think in late 2018, early 2019, and they were apartment buildings. Now, below our two industrial parcels, there are some kind of reddish, orangish areas, and both on the right and on the left side of the roads. Those are primarily commercial retail areas. So they're intended to be commercial services. I believe the Good Life Fitness is in one of those areas. There's a gas station on the other side. So that's the major usage for those areas, but it's slightly different than what we're looking at in our property, which is again quite large at 21 acres. And as I noted, it's supposed to be a subdivision. So its highest and best use is not really being contested here. It's its current use as industrial land. We've used the same land comparisons. So if possible, if I may ask the chair to possibly just, rather than me go through all of those sales, because I've already gone through them, they're the same sales, just apply them to the future briefs in this one. The only difference with this property is its size, and where do you get any proper comparisons in terms of the size? Well, they're not going to come from the city of Winnipeg, because the city of Winnipeg simply doesn't have enough supply left. at least shovel-ready supply to make any meaningful comparison. And even the comparisons that I drew from in the first chart on page 11, those are the standard ones that I've used for properties that are not, really at this stage. There are some issues still with our subject. I mean, they still need some servicing, as I mentioned, but the best comparisons are probably coming from outside of the city. And when I say outside, I don't mean in Brandon, Manitoba, or Winkler. I'm talking about within the perimeter highway, inside the perimeter highway, in the RM of McDonald and the RM of Rosser. So those two municipalities in particular have taken advantage of servicing, and they've exploited it. As I mentioned in the industrial cap rate report, there are sites around the city, Centerport in Rosser, in McGilvery, there's Southlands. You can see this on page 12, and I'll just briefly go through this. So the subject is a newer industrial subdivision with few comparisons like this inside the city of Winnipeg. Competition for this site is coming from the areas in the Winnipeg metropolitan region. So this is now what we're calling Winnipeg and the greater areas. It's now called the Winnipeg Metropolitan Region, WMR. These areas that compete are located inside the perimeter highway in the neighboring municipalities of Rossers, that's Centerport, and McDonald, that's McGilvery and South Landing industrial parks. We reviewed the following industrial sales. The only one that was anywhere close to this one occurred in May of 2022 in Centerport, and that was 17.45 acres. The zoning is industrial general. Now, industrial general zoning outside of the city of Winnipeg. City of Winnipeg essentially creates its own little coding system for all the different types of uses, but industrial general is pretty much like M2. So there is no real difference. And this one sold again in May of 2022 for $7,529,000, or roughly $760,000, 122 per acre. 465 per acre. So the only thing that's really needed at this point is, in my opinion, is just a proper adjustment based on the size. So we did that. We rounded it down to 315,000. So we've chosen a value of $606,615,000 to reflect the value of the parcel that's there, taking into consideration that there is still some servicing that needs to be put into this site, and this site is again a subdivision. It's not intended as a single site, and also taking into account the larger sale in the chart on page 12 with the property that's 17.45 acres. We've adjusted it down to 315,000, 6,615,000, and this really is in line with a reasonable increase from the previous cycle. So we don't know where the model actually just took off on this property, and in our opinion, overestimated the value of this property. So I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Harling, do you have any questions for Mr. Navarro?
I think most of them have been answered. Just kind of curious. So, because I think you kind of already alluded to it anyways, but so I know the comparables you used were outside the city. So the closest one you indicated was this one, I guess in RMF Rosser. So, so I'm just curious, that one sold for 431,000 per acre roughly. So what was the reasoning for the 315 you chose? I guess if it's more I'm not saying you're trying to say that's your best comparable, but what's the differences between these two sites? I understand one's outside the city, or they're fairly similar.
Yeah. So the bulk of the servicing has been done in the one in Rosser. So those services are in place. It's ready to go. There is some additional servicing that has to be done, but in terms of the additional adjustment, it was basically a size adjustment. Yeah, that's about it.
You know what? I think that's, I think I'll leave it at that then. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Seeland, do you have any questions?
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Warren, do you have any questions?
None, Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Neither do I. Is there a need for summary from either party on this matter?
I'm good, thank you.
Oh, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to suggest we take a brief, perhaps 10-minute recess before proceeding with the remainder of the docket.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next matter we will be addressing on this morning's docket is number 8. The address is 465 McPhillips Street. Mr. Harling, please proceed when you are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The file number is 24-2990. The roll number is 14003080100. The address is 465 McPhillips Street, and the owner is HMQ or Her Majesty the Queen, Manitoba. The 2025 roll year based on the reference date of April 1st, 2023 is $1,509,000. So this is one of the properties that we had mentioned previously before the hearing. Again, I do have a recommendation that I would like to put in, or a recommendation I'd like to present. I guess maybe just to give some context, if you want to just turn to page maybe, I guess we'll go to page, well, yeah, just go to page 3 of my brief if you'd like, if you can, just to see the subject property. So you can see here at the top here, you can kind of see the outline of the parcel. So now the thing unique part about this property is it's got, if you look at the bottom, you can see there's essentially a parking lot, just kind of like a regular shaped square piece of land. There's also another piece of land further attached to this parcel, part of a parkland, if you will. So, you know, it's a unique property in the way it's shaped. And there's some, you know, so I'm mindful, Mr. Navarro and I myself had some discussions, and I'm mindful of the situation of being a unique property. Now, if we turn to page, actually just 5 of my brief, you can kind of see the valuation summary. So you'll see the land value is assessed at $1,366,000, and we also have an additional $143,000 of depreciated cost decheck structures. So this is for like paving and lighting and such. So that's where we get the $1,509,000. So just to give some context of the value. So basically my recommendation is based on adjusting the overall value from $1,509,000 to $1,265,000.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Navarro?
We'll accept that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Seeland, do you have any questions?
Yes, this property is adjacent to the old exhibition grounds.
I believe it's actually right adjacent to the McPhillips Casino. It's just west of it, or yeah, west.
And how do you say it? The property north of it is.
Oh, yeah, that's I mean, I guess that's a park, I guess. Yeah, you know, I know the area there, honestly. I just can't remember what it was formerly used for.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So the property we're referring to in this picture, which is from page 3, I'll say it looks like a parking lot plus green space.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Based on the location, it appears to be the old exhibition grounds and the Winnipeg Nomads football field. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It appears. Thank you. Thank you. That's all my questions, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Warren?
None, thank you.
Thank you, nor do I. So thank you very much, gentlemen. And we can move on to number 9. So that is file number 24-2786, and it does not have an address. So whenever you're ready, Mr. Harlan.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So the file number is 24-2786. The roll number is 07569139140. Again, as indicated, there's no address on file. And the owner is Winnipeg Limited, city lease. It's a city lease by the city. Winnipeg is leasing the space from the city of Winnipeg. I apologize. That's the owner. So the 2025 roll year based on a reference date of April 1st, 2023 is $3,207,606. So now this is another property I do have a recommendation on. I don't know if it'll be accepted or not, but regardless, before I really go into the recommendation, I was going to ask the board if I could just kind of go through the property a bit, just explain things, because it's a bit of a unique property, so it's going to take a little bit more time to explain. So I figured before I do that, I can kind of explain, so maybe to give you some context on it, I guess. So
Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so as you can just look into the property description, you'll see the property type is Vindu or vacant industrial. The total land area is 312,168 square feet. If we just turn to page 2, you can kind of see at the top here, the property, it's located in the Murray Park industrial location of the city. And if you look at the bottom of page 2, you can see an aerial view here, and you can kind of see this red line that goes in kind of a weird shape here. So essentially, this is the property we're dealing with here. And to give you more context, if you turn to page 3, you'll get an actual idea of the actual parcel that's being assessed here. So at the top, you can kind of just see the complete outline, and in the bottom of page 3, you can just see more of a closer zoomed in area of the entire parcel. So essentially, this is a rail line. Essentially, now what some backstory? What happened with this was previously this property, all these pieces of land. If you actually look at the bottom of page 3, you can kind of see all these little parts. So now previously these were all separate pieces of land. I think there was something like 5 roll numbers that were all separate. And they were just completely separate pieces of land that were just city and not being used for anything, just city pieces of land. They weren't being taxed because they were city owned. Now, there was a lease signed with Winnipeg through the city, and so they use these lines essentially. Essentially, it's like a rail spur they use. So basically they request that they want to use this. So what we did is we actually amalgamated all these roll numbers into one. So you can see as they're all as one. They're all as one. So previously they were separately. Now, based on this lease and the fact that they're using it, it has been essentially amalgamated, all these rolls. Now, if you look at the bottom page 3, kind of like at the very east of the property, the very east red line, if you will, kind of just like a very small rectangular shape. That property just above it, that Winnipeg owns that property, and just further east of it, Winnipeg owns the other property. So there's a spur line that just essentially goes into where Winnipeg is. So they use this line for, I guess, transporting materials and such. So if we turn to page 4 of my brief, we just kind of look at the valuation summary. So we have a land value of $1,311,000. So that's just for the land. And then we have a depreciated value or a cost value of $1,896,606. So now the $1,896,606 value is essentially, we're assessing the rail spur. So that's where that value is coming from. So the rail spur is essentially the fact that they're using this particular line. Now, seeing as that there is a lease in place and they're using this rail spur, we had to assess it and we had to put a value on this rail spur. And there are other properties we have. There's not a lot, but there are other properties in the city that do have rail spurs that we assess as well. So essentially, that's where this value came from. And the rate that's applied to it is essentially a regulated rate. So it's not a model derived rate. So that rate, there's nothing I could really adjust anything on that. So, and the fact that it's being used now, we had to have to put a valuation on it and assess it. So like I said, now the land value, again, is $1,311,000. So I'm mindful of the situation of this property being very unique, and the fact that it's essentially rail line. The use of it would be very, what else could you use it for? And I'm very mindful of that fact. So, what I've done is in the recommendation I'm going to provide here is essentially I'm making a recommendation on adjusting the land value. So essentially, we're using 312,168 square feet. That's the total land value of all those pieces of land. And we're currently using a rate of $4.20 a square foot, which, I believe is high, obviously, for what it is and what the use is, and I'm mindful you can't really be used for anything. So essentially, I put a nominal land rate of $1.15 a square foot on that 312,160 square feet, which gives us a revised land value of $359,000. So that value, including with the rail spur value at $1,896,000, gives us a total revised value of 2,254,606. So basically, that's what my recommendation is. So I'm making an adjustment on the land rate, and that's essentially where I'm going with that. So
Thank you very much. Mr. Navarro, do you have any questions for the assessor, or are you willing to accept the recommendation?
I do. Can you just repeat the value again, the recommendation?
sure, it's 2,200,000.
And the breakdown, sorry, while you're.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll start with the, yeah, I can do that for sure. So again, the land area is 312,168 square feet. So the land rate I'm applying is $1.15 a square foot, which gives a revised land value of 359,000. And then the rail spur value is assessed at 1,896,606, which then gives us a revised value with the land and the rail spur at 2,254,606. Hopefully that's sorry if I maybe went a little quick on that. Sorry. So
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, did you have any other questions?
No questions, Madam Chair, and we'll accept it.
Okay. Mr. Seelan, do you have any questions?
Would that be 2,255,000 rounded?
so yeah, the total value 2,250,000. Yeah, you could round up to 2,255,000 if you like. Yeah, it's just you can round it up to that.
That's all my questions, Madam Chair.
Ms. Warren, did you have any questions?
None, thank you.
And I do not have any questions on this matter either. So I believe that completes our docket for this morning, and we have heard all the items scheduled. So this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you every morning. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a good rest of your morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, you too.
Thanks.